In today's world, what happens is that when you think about education in particular, you find that the private sector is never invited to the table. One of the ways that we are mobilizing people is by organizing summits in different parts of the world to make sure that this crisis that we face today about the learning crisis, we overcome it by putting the best minds on the case. Today we have the London Summit, which is hosted by Mayor Boris Johnson.
It's a great pleasure to welcome you here to City Hall today, to the London Summit for the Business Backs Education campaign. We've hosted the London Summit, which is one of a series of events taking place around the world, and we've brought together a range of business leaders from different sectors to talk about why education matters to them.
As a society, we are failing to prepare kids psychologically and intellectually for the reality of what the job market demands.
London Stock Exchange Group is a big backer of this campaign. And not just as we've heard it from the mayor, because the business of education is good business, because what we do is about financing the real economy, and we can't do that if we stop investing in primary and secondary education.
We are really interested in how businesses can partner with schools in the city and ensure that young people of all backgrounds can have access to the great opportunities that the city has.
When I was growing up, you had huge campaigns around things like famine in Ethiopia, you had Band-Aid. After that, I remember the most notable one was to do with the AIDS epidemic and see how we could actually, the whole society could come around to think about solutions to this. Then you had the climate change dialogue that started off to look at how do we reduce our carbon footprint and how do we protect the environment. You know, in my memory, there's never been an education-led campaign that is global in its nature. But you look at the tension, strife, the conflict that our global society today is in, at the heart of it, to resolving this, is education. If that is the case, why aren't people coming out more effectively and saying, actually, we need to invest more in this? Evidence suggests that companies spend 16 times more on global healthcare initiatives than they do about education. This campaign addresses that by making sure the private sector is engaged in the discussion, in the dialogue, is actually putting its resources behind making sure that every child has the best opportunity to prosper during its lifetime by investing in education.
And all the surveys that you're seeing now, it doesn't matter which part of the world, the number one threat or challenge identified by corporate CEOs to their business sustainability over the long term is the talent issue, is the access to good talent. So it's a business imperative as well as being a social and moral imperative.
When businesses come together, we want them to agree to a few fundamental principles. The first is that they engage in a constructive way. For that, the UN have created a framework of engagement for the private sector. How do you do so ethically and in a proper way?
It is not just about to have a very qualified workforce, but it is rather to have communities which are flourishing, which are at peace with themselves, expanding, of course, business opportunities, but in a very, I would say, enabling environment.
The second thing is that when you look at corporate social responsibility or sustainability or global citizenship, all we're asking for is that whatever your budget is, 20% of that by 2020, please allocate to education.
In this country and throughout the world, it is important that business commits a considerable proportion of their social responsibility budget to education issues, whether it's improving education in the developing world or indeed in this country.
So if we were to say that these UK companies, they invest 20% of their corporate social responsibility programs in education by 2020, that will result in something like $350 million extra being committed towards education.
I think that this is hugely important. I mean, we would not be doing this, and I would not be encouraging this, and other senior colleagues of mine would not be encouraging this, if we didn't feel that it was a real imperative. And I think it is a real imperative. And I think also the other thing is for companies is this point about a two-way street, that their staff will get a lot out of this.
The third objective of the campaign is actually to understand, not from the business sector end of it, but from the school end of it. So we're convening roundtables or school principals who are telling us, well, what do we want from the private sector? I don't think anyone's ever asked them that before.
I think there's been a lack of connectivity perhaps between education and business in a strategic manner, and I hope that this will be the beginning of that strategy whereby we can work together to address the skills gap in London and to also ensure that the wealth of talent and the talent pool that we have in London are being made available to business.
I think businesses need to think about investing in education because partly it makes sound business sense. They're thinking about their future workforce, they're thinking about the stability of the economies that they're working in, whether it's a major city like London or whether it's a developing country abroad. And I think employees in businesses also genuinely care about wanting to give back. So that power of goodwill is really valuable. And I think businesses that harness it will see lots of rewards, will reap the dividends in the long term.
Securing that talent, securing that young ambition is going to be transformational to your business, but it's also fun.
These are all ways to mobilize opinion, and at the end of it, to create a body of business leaders and companies who stand squarely behind education and say, we back you.